Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Welcome again, everybody. Very lovely to see you all here and also online. And yeah, so I'd like to say a few words on Dharma this evening. Yeah, I talked about the Eightfold Path over these weeks, and I spent a little bit of time talking about each of the path factors, and finishing on Friday talking about right stillness, sama samadhi, right concentration. And in a way, this is like the culmination of the path of practice. And yeah, so stillness, focus, concentration is really important in our practice, isn't it? And there's the peacefulness and the relaxation and the easefulness of a mind that's less cluttered, of a mind that's more still. And yet there's also the need to put effort in and energize and kind of bring up enthusiasm in our practice. So it's quite interesting, the balance between these kind of qualities, quality of energy, quality of stillness. And I think I'll talk about the Enlightenment practice tonight, because you get the same kind of balancing of qualities as we practice. As we practice, we develop the 7 Enlightenment factors. And just because they're called Enlightenment practice, we don't need to think they're kind of they're far away or unattainable. Not at all. I mean, actually, I'd like to speak about them so we can recognize them, because it's really good to recognize the positive results of our practice, you know, and to sort of chart our progress a little bit, to give us encouragement. We tend to have this negative bias, most of us. I think it's a fairly recognized phenomenon that the human mind is kind of conditioned to spot the negative, to pick up on the negative aspects, and particularly in relation to ourselves. We can be quite self-critical, can't we? You know, quite hard on ourselves. And we tend to notice our faults more than our positive qualities. But the Buddha actually advised us, encouraged us said, you know, the skillful way to relate to this one is to make much of the good qualities, really celebrate the good qualities, because it lifts the heart, it encourages us, it gives us motivation. And I think most of us are like that. Most of us appreciate feeling good about ourselves and appreciate praise. And we can really choose how we relate to ourselves as practitioners, as human beings, and support the practice in this way. So the Enlightenment factors are really lovely to consider. And, you know, we have beautiful chant, Enlightenment factor chant, the Bojjhanga chant, and it's a protection chant. It's called a paritta, one of the parittas that we chant to bless people, to bless a situation, to bless ourselves. And I love that the Buddha himself used to ask people to chant this to him. It's actually in the suttas. When he was unwell, he would ask to hear about the enlightenment factors. So it's uplifting. It's supposed to be healing to consider these factors, and it surely is healing. I watched a film a couple of days ago that Christine recommended, a very dharmic documentary about trauma. It was very beautiful. I can't remember the name of the doctor, psychiatrist, Gabor somebody? Gabor Mate, yeah. Is he Canadian? Yeah, right. So I'm sure he's famous in Canada, or he's famous all over the world, I'm sure. Yeah. I'd seen him before, but this is all about his work, this film that I saw. And it was really very moving, seeing him working with all different people, and just the recognition that he has, that he's sharing, that we've all been traumatized, most likely. Every single person, has had some experiences of kind of not being able to cope in the situation that they're in, and therefore carrying kind of residues of trauma in the body, in the heart, in the mind. And I found that a very powerful film, and of course so true. It's so true. We all have dukkha. We all experience dukkha. And the whole Buddhist journey is about working with the suffering that we have, isn't it? And coming to understand the suffering that we have. And through understanding, discovering the cause of suffering, letting go of the cause, and therefore freeing the heart from suffering. And this clarity that comes, these enlightenment factors that arise over time, they arise actually almost immediately when we start practicing, and then they just keep growing. They're growing throughout our practice. And I see them as, the healing elements that enable us to overcome all the traumas that we're holding in the system, and that we might experience through our practice, through, making space. And that's exactly what he does with people, isn't it? He was, showing how people really just simply need to have time and space in order to recollect, which is the meaning of mindfulness, of sati, to recollect, the areas of pain, of obstruction, of not seeing clearly, of holding onto trauma. And it's quite a journey for each and every person, because the first thing is to notice, to know, to notice, to feel, to be aware of what we're carrying, isn't it? And we're all carrying these burdens, and we don't know that we're carrying them until we do. We sort of slowly begin to recognize this. And when I started meditating, I was quite young, and I didn't really have a clue, actually, about life. I hadn't suffered really. And then I started meditating, and I recognized actually there was suffering. There was suffering to be experienced, and slowly, recognizing that we carry past karma. And another word for that may be trauma, in fact. One way of relating to our suffering is to call it trauma. And I can really see how, they had a number of people who were drug addicts, and homeless people living on the streets, living really like difficult lives because of not being able to kind of fit in, not being able to cope with what they're carrying, the burdens that they're carrying. And these burdens can become overwhelming for people. But recognizing that we're all in the same boat. So I found it a very compassionate film, and it was very, the wisdom of seeing that we're all in the same boat here. We're not, there's not better and worse. There's more fortunate and less fortunate. But the difficulties that we're dealing with, it's the same for everyone. So coming back to the enlightenment factors, it's like this is the healing. These are the healing qualities that we can actually notice quite naturally developing as we practice. And what the patients, the clients or the people in this film who were working with Gabor, what they were experiencing was very much like a meditation to me. It was stillness, it was coming home to themselves, they're being encouraged to feel what they feel, to remember what needs to be remembered and to make space for that. And then this healing was happening, even people being healed of physical illnesses, quite remarkably, because the root cause of those illnesses, of course, was presumably was the mental, the heart pain that they're carrying. So how amazing. So anyway, these enlightenment factors, let's consider them one by one. And the first one's investigation of dharma, Dhamma. And this for me is like a something that grows over time as we practice. It's this curiosity and interest and fascination even with what's actually going on when we sit, when we meditate, how things happen, how reality manifests for us. You know, when I started meditating, I was absolutely blown away just to realize that I had a body. You know, just to really be in touch with this body, to feel the body from the inside was a completely revelatory experience for me. So clearly I had not really connected with my physical form. I hadn't connected and noticed that I was embodied. Tremendous dissociation, remarkable. And it really was amazing to me to actually be encouraged, be, you know, guided to pay attention to the feelings in the body. How could I not have noticed that before? I really hadn't. I was really living in my head because I was quite academic and studying a lot, learning a lot. This thing under my head was just to get me from A to B, you know, and just to enjoy occasionally, you know, the odd meal, to enjoy certain aspects of it. But really, it was like a machine in a way. The relationships I had with my body, when I look back and reflect, it was really very much mirroring the kind of relationship that we have as a species with nature. You know, it's just that, you know, it's useful. It's beautiful, yes, but I'm not really part of it. I'm not really deeply connected with it. And for me, it's been a journey. Just as my body awareness has grown over time, so the relationship with nature has deepened and opened up. And I don't think I'm that unusual. I think actually, you know, none of us are unique, are we? We're actually all quite similar in many respects. So I think this is probably a very common experience, to realize that we're not, we have to almost learn to come home to this body, to come home to nature. And this is what Dharma is. Dharma is nature. Dharma is reality. And we tend to live in our heads, to some extent, I think, as a way of kind of just ignoring a whole swathes of what is, of our experience. And I'm quite sure I had a lot of trauma in my body. I had a lot of blockages. I had a lot of blind spots, a lot of things I didn't want to consider. I didn't want to remember things from childhood, my childhood, and maybe even before that. So, you know, slowly, through body awareness, we can start to disentangle and really bear with the suffering that reveals itself. And this is investigation of dharma. And to apply the mind, to this process is something amazing to me. When we sit and meditate and we're watching the breath, just relaxing and focusing, see what the mind does, seeing what happens, seeing what comes up for us in the mind, the mental formations. It's amazing to me. You never know what's coming next. And retreats, for example. I don't know about you all, but I've done quite a lot of retreats, and they're always different. There's no two the same. There's no way of predicting what's going to happen and how it's going to be, because we don't really know ourselves, but we're getting to know ourselves. And it's not really ourselves, it's just this human experience, this life experience. There's so much in there that's just really waiting to be seen. It's waiting to be to reveal itself, to be learned from, to come to a place of peace, actually, to come to kind of fulfillment, and then to just pass away. That's the way of nature. Things arising in order to have their lifespan, and then be able to pass away. And the absolute gift of meditation, our work of meditation, is to allow that to happen. And all the time we're investigating, we're observing, we're witnessing, we're bearing with the suffering, and we're observing nature. And this healing is happening. It's like an opening up. It's like a resolution. It's even something like salvation, I would say. We're saving ourselves. We're kind of coming to working through perhaps not just personal trauma, perhaps not just personal issues. There's nothing that's really personal. It's more like we can work through all the suffering that's there. My teacher Goenkaji, he said, if you want to really practice, you have to be aware that you're going to be plowing through the entire field of suffering. There's not one aspect of suffering that you're not going to come to know, to experience. And I think the Buddha really said that in his path, in his passage of his last lifetime as Siddhartha Gautama. He experienced every kind of suffering. He said, there's no pain and distress I haven't experienced. So, that can sound a bit grim, but actually it's really to see clearly, to open to all of this, to be willing to face up and allow. And what's interesting to me is that when we do face up to suffering, we open up to it. It's like the big monster. When I'm aware of something arising in the heart, some difficulty, and I turn away, it can feel like a big monster, something really kind of threatening and quite horrible and quite difficult. But when we actually turn and face it with our full awareness, with good heart, with metta, with an open, attentive gaze, then the monster inevitably kind of shrinks away and turns into something quite benevolent even over time. It's interesting. And we discover, there's no monsters out there. There's nothing to fear. But this investigation is required, this willingness to be with, to not neglect any aspect of our experience, not push away any kinds of feelings, however difficult they might be to be with. Feelings like shame, feelings like vulnerability, feelings like rage, fear, the kind of things we don't really want to own, but we need to allow all these difficult emotions, their day in the sun, and then the monsters will turn into our friends, you know. We don't have any enemies. We don't have anything to fear. We can make friends with everything and then everyone. So investigation of dharma is the great healing, really, this first enlightenment factor, just the willingness to open up again and again to what is, to what we're experiencing, and allow and all the suppressed material, you know. Most of us, you know, we tend to learn to suppress the emotions that are not acceptable, don't we? And this is in this film, you know, people often are getting sick and getting into all sorts of difficult life situations because they're actually sitting on and suppressing and holding a whole load of negative emotions. And of course they're there and they're going to manifest and they're going to rule. They're going to take over if we don't, you know, make peace with them, acknowledge and recognize and work with and come through these difficult emotions. And so, yeah, many of us have a lot of suppressed anger, a lot of suppressed negativity, because we're not supposed to feel those things. We're not supposed to be like that. You know, we're not supposed to behave in certain ways. And the beauty of this investigation of dharma, and then the second factor, enlightenment factor of mindfulness, awareness, this is really meditation. The mindfulness we develop in meditation. You know, the beauty of these qualities is that we don't actually have to act or speak out of anger or hatred or, you know, fear or any kind of negative emotion. We can actually contain. We can contain these things. We can let them arise and we can work with them. And we don't have to act out. And this is the beauty, this is the safety of the practice, that it gives us a container so that we can safely, with the help of the precepts, you know, the Eightfold Path, this sila, the factors, right action, right speech, right livelihood, the training that we're giving ourselves. So we can be safe, we know we can. We can contain very powerful negative energies. And we know how to work with them. We sit with them. You know, we just let them be, own them, accept them, acknowledge them, and allow them to live and then pass away. And sometimes this can take great skill, can't it? It really can. Because as we become more aware, we can see how, you know, in everyday life, negative emotions can come up. But then we really know how to direct our attention in such a way that we're really giving time and space for those emotions and not giving so much importance to the triggers, to whatever's going on around us. Just the ability to resource ourselves, find a quiet place, make time and work with them. So, you know, all of this is possible for us. And actually, this leads me to some other factors, enlightenment factors, which are those of tranquility, of stillness, and of equanimity. And there is this beautiful balance because these factors, all three, are kind of taming, calming, peaceful qualities that come through our practice on the spiritual path. We have those moments, don't we, of, you know, the pauses between waves of waves of whatever kind of experiences we're dealing with, waves of emotion, waves of you know, difficulty, pain, suffering. There are moments of peace, and you know, we can really recognize them. Recognize the moments when something comes to an end, when I was really irritable and then I'm not now. I was really feeling a lot of sadness and it's over, it's past. So noticing the waves and noticing the troughs. And these qualities, of tranquility, passaddhi, of stillness, samadhi, and of equanimity, upekkha, they actually manifest more and more as our meditation practice develops over time, inevitably. And it's worth noticing them because they can be a bit invisible sometimes. We can feel, as I say, the negative bias of focusing more on our difficulties, but to really notice and to cultivate, therefore, when we notice qualities, we also are actually cultivating them at the same time. They're just strengthened by our attention. So to bring in these balancing factors, to sort of balance with mindfulness, with investigation of dharma, and also this other quality of energy, virya, which develops with our practice. Energy, hugely important to keep us going, to motivate us. It grows with practice. And we can notice that, we can observe that. And then we get to kind of, it's a bit like playing musical instruments. It's a bit like an orchestra. We have all these different qualities. Let's see how we can bring in balancing qualities when needed. So if I'm feeling quite agitated, I can just remember that there's the possibility of stillness, of equanimity, and bring it in. All the times we've experienced peace and well-being in our practice, don't forget them, and bring them in, recollect, and allow the practice to move in the direction of samadhi, to move in the direction of stillness, of focus. We can fine-tune things. It's beautiful that we can do that. We become the masters of our mind, don't we? When there's dullness, when there's a sense of sort of perhaps contentment and peace, but maybe not a lot of motivation to observe what's going on around us, bring in the investigation of dharma. We can do that. We can energize the mind, bring in energy, effort, and sharpen our mindfulness. And it's really something for me, it's exciting that we can continually notice how it is right now. How am I? How am I relating to the situation around me right now? Am I blurring out? Am I dulling the mind? Am I falling asleep to some extent? Bring in some energy. Or am I getting agitated and worked up? Overexcited, overheated. Okay, just breathe a bit deeper. Come back to the body. Develop some stillness. And this is for all through the day, all through the night when we're not asleep. These qualities are with us. And, we can celebrate them and we can give them attention and just watch them grow as we practice. And each of these qualities that I've talked about is a healing quality. And there's one more that I haven't mentioned. The seventh is piti, which is rapture, which is one of the energizing factors. And, some people experience this in their meditation practice. I talked about samadhi last time, as I said, and, one of the results of developing samadhi, developing stillness and focus is that we start to feel really good. It starts to feel very pleasant. The body becomes a pleasant abiding for us. And this can be a great blessing on the path in a way. It can be a great encouragement for us. It's not something to hold on to. And in fact, as the mind becomes more still, as the mind becomes more peaceful, we don't even want to hold on to it because there's agitation within that rapture. But to experience the sense of well-being in the body, a body that's full of pleasant feeling is a very helpful thing. It's a healing thing, again. And for many people, when they're practicing with pain, whether it's physical pain or whether it's mental pain, emotional pain, we get to experience the releasing of that from time to time. Something shifts, so some letting go, something passes, and the heart is a little bit lighter. We've dropped a little bit of the burden, and we can notice that, and the pleasure and the peace and relaxation that can come from, in a way, the passing away of some suffering, some trauma, some source of pain for us, dukkha. So all these things can be considered, and see if you can notice any of these 7 factors or all of these 7 factors in your practice, in your experience of meditation, and also in life generally. And it's interesting that all the qualities I've described and all the other qualities that the Buddha describes as our spiritual friends and allies, strengths, and there are so many ways that he described these positive qualities that one can cultivate through practice. In all of these cases, if we can know them, recognize them, consider them, and see if we can experience them, then this is very helpful for us. So a positive bias rather than a negative bias is hugely helpful. In so many ways the Buddha recommended. Lift your heart, give yourself encouragement, make much of our goodness. It's like when we do it, when we perform, make an act of generosity, and we give, do it wholeheartedly, do it with all your attention, and make much of your gift. And it's funny because it kind of goes a bit against our conditioning to some extent. We're conditioned to be quite modest and self-effacing. This is not a bad thing at all, but to minimize the good that we do, to make little of it, and it's never good enough, sort of thing. It's just nothing. But actually, the Buddha really encouraged us to make much of our goodness, to really make much of it, because this helps us to appreciate what's worth appreciating and praise what's worthy of praise, both for ourselves and for others. And so in the same way, any and all good qualities that we have, that we notice in ourselves, well, great, wonderful, remember them. The Buddha said at the time of death, what we should be spending our time doing. 2 things really. One is meditating, being mindful. Watch every breath so that when your last breath comes, you'll know you're going to be with that last breath. Follow it all the way to the end. And the second thing is to recollect your virtue, recollect your goodness, focus your attention on that. At the time of death, think of all the good things that you've done and let the mind rest in that. And of course, when it comes to other people, if we're in the very, sacred position of being with another person when they're making their transition, coming to that end of their life, that's precisely what we should be encouraging them to do. Be aware of the body, be aware of the breath. And I've had the experience with people who've never meditated, no interest in any kind of spiritual path whatsoever. And yet, when it comes to these times, there's a real openness because one wants to focus at that time on such matters. That people seek guidance, they seek support at these times. Maybe not everybody, but certainly it's a dukkha opens the doors, doesn't it? The first noble truth. If we can really take that on board, then that's the beginning of the spiritual path for us. It opens the doors, leads us forward, leads us onward. So in the same way, anyone and everyone in this situation coming to the end of the life, we shouldn't be shy about talking about mindfulness, offering guidance, meditation guidance, watching the breath, feeling the body, coming home to this experience. It's a great gift to anyone at such a time. And the recollection of virtue, thinking of all the good that they've done, reminding them of anything we know that this person's done for us or for those around us, bringing that to their attention again and again and celebrating it. And in this way, we have a heart that's resourced, that's light, that's happy and present. So back to the enlightenment factors, it's the same thing, really. It's fascinating and amazing that the more we attend to them, the more we consider them and make much of them, then the more they grow. We're giving them space. And it's not to neglect all the difficult emotions and experiences, the trauma that we have, the dukkha that we still hold in our hearts until we're liberated. Not to neglect those things, but it's to balance the negative bias, to give ourselves the strength and the encouragement, the inspiration, really, to keep practicing and face up, face the monsters, face the demons, and realize then that actually they're not quite like that after all, you know. Let all those frightening, difficult, shameful, painful, vulnerable, raging aspects of the human heart, let them all in, welcome them all. It's like sitting in the armchair. Doors are open. Open the doors, welcome them all in, all the guests. Come on in, come on in. Make yourselves at home. You're welcome here, you know. And when the demons and the monsters are welcome, then they become softer, they become less ugly, more socially adept. They become our friends. They become our friends. And then they'll come and then they'll go, you know. They'll linger for a while, maybe quite a long time. But they'll find their way out eventually. That's the way of it. So I think I've said enough on the subject of the enlightenment factors and cultivating positive bias. And I wish you all very well with that and with your practice. Sadhu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So we have time. We have precisely 15 minutes. So if anybody would like to share comments, reflections, questions, you're very welcome. Okay, I have a question here. I'm going to move the camera. Here we go.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So it's more like a comment, and then I would like you to elaborate or share your thoughts. It was when you talked about disassociation, and I had a image of two bodies and a mathematical picture as well. And so it's regards to disassociation, presence, and samsaras. So the two bodies. So first I'll tell you the mathematical image. On the left side is like negative infinity. And then 0, it's an integer line. And on the right side, positive infinity. And so on the left, far left, is the most disassociated body. So what came with that was, so someone maybe who's split personality, because that can happen in trauma where they develop multiple personalities to deal with the different traumas, or someone who can leave their body disassociation and be up in the the ceiling and watch their body as they're being abused. So that would be the most far end. And then as you move along the scale, you get more normal, well, not normal, but people with less and less trauma. So they're still not being able to have any kind of presence. And you get to 0, and that's just kind of the person living their life normally without meditation or anything. And then so as you add that meditation, so I forgot to mention, the body on the far left would be this body, like if you see it visually or in color, it would be like very gray, full of samsara, that there's not enough energy for them to feel or experience the self, so much so that the self has to leave the body. And so then as you do the meditation, so they might experience like anger in their solar plexus, or sorrow in their lungs, or they might feel things, samsaras leave their body. And then as they continue through that, then they start feeling space, and then joy can enter and peace can enter. And then when you get to the part where you can feel the joy or the rapture, there would be this body, and hence the word enlightenment, this body that has no more gray, where that grayness has left the body, and you have this body of light.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's really, we do have, right? You just shared this rather remarkable vision that you had. And we do often benefit or naturally bring up some kind of image to kind of almost explain to ourselves what it is we're trying to understand and how it is. And that's a really very interesting image that you've shared with us. And thank you for that. And it sounds so true, that we can go from the most dissociated, where we're not really in touch at all with our body. We're not really in touch at all with our feelings. And that's not uncommon. It's really not uncommon. And I think for a lot of people, when we start meditating, it can be quite surprising. The process of actually coming back. And then, yes, the lightness, the enlightenment, the lightness that can slowly but surely, begin to manifest for us. Quite beautiful, quite remarkable. I remember actually reminded me of something, which is the first retreat I ever did. After a few days, I remember, like, very mundane, I'm sitting in this meditation hall, I get up, I'm going down the stairs, the sun was shining, and the person in front of me, who at the time I didn't know at all, but I got to know him later, he had very long blonde hair. And I just remember seeing the light on his hair. And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I was absolutely transfixed. And I realized a little bit later that it was simply that my mind had cleared to some extent, and suddenly everything looked a bit brighter. And that effect was then, that continued for me. So how remarkable, we are. Things can be a bit gray when we're carrying a lot of suffering. And as we have this amazing opportunity to work through our suffering, let go of suffering, let's notice that lightness, brightness that actually starts to manifest for us. Thank you very much for sharing that. Anybody else like to comment, reflect, add, question? We've got about 10 minutes. Anything that comes to your mind you'd like to share, feel free. Yeah. Leslie, hello.
It's funny that Leslie, yes. It's funny that you should be talking about this today, because I'm doing Bhikkhu Analayo's course on the Satipatthana Sutta, and this week we're talking about the factors of enlightenment again. I wish that he had given us much helpful information on the investigation as you have. That was very helpful. I knew Gabor Mate in university, and he was a character then and an extraordinary person now. He leads people to investigate in a way that is so healthy. But Analayo's emphasis is on finding joy when you discover that you do not have one hindrance or another, that the joy you discover when you are not feeling greed or anger or something can in fact lead you into the factors of enlightenment, the joy, the piti of the first stages of piti and leading to enlightenment. And he keeps emphasizing finding joy in your practice, which I do love, and it's very helpful.
Yeah, that is so helpful. Thank you so much, Leslie, for sharing that. It's really great to hear about the course as well with Bhante and Alio. Brilliant. Yeah, I think joy is very important. And, you know, this Buddhist path, it really is a path of joy, actually. You know, and people often think, you know, because the Buddha emphasized actually the negative aspect of dukkha, people often think, oh dear, you know, Buddhism, a bit grim, but not at all, not at all. The whole point is that we're coming out of suffering. And it's really, you know, these teachings are really, in a way, the only way out of suffering. I'm not saying that only Buddhism has guidance for this, because other religions also encourage us to be practicing, living virtuous lives, avoiding harm. But all the pieces kind of fall into place for us. We have all the kind of roadmap to really experience the end of suffering, you know. It's remarkable. And so, of course, it's a path of joy. Nibbana is described, isn't it, as the ultimate happiness. And it's interesting you mentioned the hindrances, Leslie, as a kind of that which obscures joy, that which prevents us from experiencing the joy that's really quite natural for us. It's quite natural to the human heart. But these hindrances get in the way. And so when the hindrances fall away, this quality, this enlightenment factor of piti can really manifest. That rapture is able to manifest. The mind will become very still quite naturally. And then we will experience really profound well-being in all different degrees. And then actually, you know, what's important, if we experience jhana, we experience a very focused, concentrated, still mind, is to review, to notice what's happened. Because inevitably that changes. Inevitably, peace doesn't last for us in this human realm. The peace doesn't last until we are free from all causes of greed, hatred, delusion. So inevitably, until that time, we'll recognize the hindrances will come back in again. And every time we have the chance to notice the arising and passing of the hindrances, we're getting that bit sharper. We're getting that bit better, charting our course through these obstructions, you know, and we'll come to the end of them. It's just a matter of time. But this investigation of dharma, the wisdom that it relates to, the wisdom that arises, helps us to really see, you know, almost like look out for the hindrances, you know, seek them out in order to move through them. So again, it's an encouragement to enjoy the joy and also to see where the joy is not present yet. Work with those places, the kind of dark corners, you know, the shadowy places. To seek those out, use energy to seek those out, and then notice the joy that comes as we move through them, you know. Thank you so much, Leslie. We've just got a few minutes for anyone else who might like to bring in any reflections, comments, questions. Excellent. Well, if there's no questions, I tell you what, let's finish with a few moments of peaceful, or maybe not so peaceful, being with what is. Let's sit together for, we've got just 3 or 4 minutes. I'll ring the gong at the end. Thank you all for your patient, wise listening, for being with us tonight. All good wishes. Bye.